All right, welcome everybody to Culture Goes Pop, episode 21. I'm Steve Strobridge, and I am joined by
Scott Wilson.
Scott Wilson is here, and guess what? We're doing it live. We typically don't do this stuff live, but we're doing it live. Didn't tell anybody. Nobody might watch us, and that's okay. But what are we going to talk about today, Scott? I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Oh yes, we're going to talk about The Rock finally not really playing a superhero, but playing in the superhero sandbox with Black Adam. That's what we're going to talk about.
Now, just out of curiosity, will there be spoilers?
Yes, there will. Yes, there will. So those who are spoiler averse should be wary and probably hit the pause button and watch this after they've seen the film if they're squeamish about such things.
Right. And I literally just got done seeing it like less than an hour ago. So it's still fresh in my mind. And I am super excited to talk about this movie. So why don't you just kick it off, Scott? Initial impressions.
Initial impressions, it's okay.
Oh my God. You are
middling.
horrible.
It's middling. I mean, it's not terrible, because I've seen some reactions where people think it's the worst thing to come down the pike in a long time, and some people who are raving about it. I'm kind of right in the middle of that. There's certain elements I thought were entertaining, but I think the film itself should have gone through a few more script revisions or something, because some of it seems a little half-baked. But what were your impressions?
Okay. In a word, loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Absolutely enjoyed it. Was thoroughly entertained. It had action. It had comedy. It had suspense. It had plot twists. There are some things I will nitpick about. But for me, going to see this movie, ignorance was bliss, because I don't know anything about Black Adam. Never read the comic books. Don't know who he is, what he is, why he is. I don't have any fanboy expectations on what box this needed to fit into. I was only hoping to be entertained, which I thoroughly was, and then it would have been a bonus if there was a decent story to tell me about Black Adam. And for me, I got both of those. I got entertainment, and I got to know about the Black Adam they presented in this cinematic form. He might not be the same way he is in the comic lore, but the cinema version of Black Adam, big fan.
Okay, I don't really know anything about the character. I went into this very blind. The only thing I remember about Shazam, I remember there was a Saturday morning cartoon when I was about 6 years old.
Shazam! Yes, with Billy Batson and his grandfather driving around in the camper, of all things,
right.
The RV.
And there was also a live action show, I remember, that came on very early on Saturday mornings. But that one is...
that was it. That was it, the live action one. I think that was on like the Sid and Marty Krofft Saturday Hour or something like that,
yes,
where they had that segment. And yeah, it was 70s cheese at its finest. But as a kid, you ate it up. You know what I mean? Just like watching the 67 Batman as a kid. You loved it, right? The spectacle, the color, the costumes. You didn't have a cynical, snide adult perspective on anything. Right. I enjoyed watching it. There was a spin-off from that too that was Almighty Isis, which is like a chick that got some Egyptian powers. I don't think she was from a comic book. I think they just made her up for the show. But that was my first introduction to the character Captain Marvel by that series Shazam from the 70s. I know he's in the DC comic universe. I know he's got powers. There's a recent movie called Shazam too, where he's got powers pretty much on par with Superman. He can fly. He's got powers. He's got speed. And the only thing I knew about Black Adam was he was kind of like to Shazam or Captain Marvel what the Reverse Flash was to the Flash, right? Similar powers, similar costume, just inverse color scheme. That's about all I knew about Black Adam. So... but loved the movie.
Okay. I'm going to have to add some context here, I see. That this is going to be a Siskel and Ebert episode here. I'm going to have to add some context for why I feel the way I feel. I mean,
okay.
the long and short of it, I like the basic idea of Black Adam himself not being a superhero, quote unquote. I think
Right.
in the comics he's more of an anti-hero or maybe a full-on villain. I really don't know, because all I know about this from the start is the comic book cover that they reference at the end where he's sitting on the
Right.
throne. Again,
Right.
first big spoiler, but
Right.
um, I like the basic idea of, like I said, him not exactly being a good guy. Uh, and I feel like the opening moments with him kind of set me up for sort of a superpowered slasher movie. With him as like sort of the big bad, or the Freddy Krueger, or the Jason Voorhees,
Right.
and it was going to be more about the people of that city, that fictional city, trying to stop him, trying to put the genie back in the bottle. And I was sort of really, in the mood for something like that, because I don't know if we've ever seen a superhero movie, or not necessarily a superhero film, but a film in either the Marvel or DC cinematic universes that handle the subject matter in that way. And
Okay,
then,
well, because sorry to interrupt you, but because we're doing this live, we do have a question from our live audience,
oh
and
wow,
I got to give a shout out to Dr. Dre, my another one of my partners in crime from back in the day. But Andre Holdendorf is out there, and he's saying he hasn't seen it yet. But since neither one of us know anything about Black Adam, can we name something about the story that either of you did not like? You're starting to mention that now too. This unchained
right,
power, and not being able to contain this power. That's something you would have liked to have seen.
right.
Uh, Go ahead.
Right. And I kind of feel as though the Justice Society, they play a big role in this story. I didn't think they were really necessary. I felt like it would have been better just to use this movie to introduce Black Adam himself. And I think that the movie kind of wavers on whether or not he's a hero. Despite what the dialogue tells us, they kind of waver on that. And in the end, spoiler, they allow him to become a full-on hero, even though they're kind of saying that's not the case. That is the case. And I kind of wish they would have simply chose the opposite direction, because that just would have been more interesting. Have this first movie about him being introduced to the viewers. Have this
Mm-hmm.
first movie being about, if the Justice Society have to be in it, have them, their mission initially was to put him back in the bottle. And again, they kind of half step on. They back away from that at the end. No, I would have loved to have seen that. Have him set up as this threat that you sort of only unleash when you absolutely have to, like the Hulk, the way the Avengers uses
Right.
the Hulk.
Right.
And the movie kind of, I mean, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this. I think the movie kind of did a 180 when it came to that, when it came right down to it.
Okay, so let me get to Andrew's question about what did we not like. Number one, if I had to summarize it, do I love it or hate it? I love the movie. I thought it was an action roller coaster. It had the right amounts of action and the right amounts of humor. Everything you could want in a superhero blockbuster movie. So I'll just start off by saying I absolutely love the movie, but let's get nitpicky. Scott Wilson has expressed he wished he would have been more of an anti-hero and maybe more of a menace. I can't disagree with that, but I'll tell you point blank what I didn't like. I didn't like, kind of like what you were saying, bringing in the Justice Society, were they called?
Yeah, the JSA.
Bringing them in. This plot mechanism has been done too many times in superhero films, where you have two different factions that think each one is the enemy of the other, and we have to get into a big fight and not get along for a period of time before we finally realize that neither one of us is the enemy of the other, and we have a common goal and we have a common foe. So there has to be this fake rivalry for a period of time, and just to prove who's got the biggest what, right? So let's just fight and let's flex and let's do all these different things. So the battle between Hawkman, and by the way, loved Hawkman, the character and the actor. I could get a little bit nitpicky about it, but I think bringing Hawkman into the cinematic universe is great. But yeah, that whole battle between the Justice Society and Black Adam when they first meet, it's like, don't you even want to ask a question like, hey, dude, are you, friend or foe? What are your intentions? Are you good? You good or you bad? Right? No, let's just try to kick his ass because he's here. Right? So that whole thing, that felt contrived to me. And that's just something I've seen countless times in the superhero films where we got to not get along until we get along. So that is one component I did not like to answer Andrew's earlier question. We have another question from Zach that we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, that's my main complaint was that, like you mentioned, the Justice Society felt like a crutch having them in the film. When the movie's called Black Adam, it's not Black Adam and the Justice Society. It was called Black Adam.
Exactly. It took the focus away. It really took the
Yeah.
focus away from the main character. Just to get to Zach Rose and to give him a shout out. Zach Rose is a friend of mine, Facebook friend of mine. I often see him liking my posts or taking the time to make a comment in my posts on Facebook. So what's up, Zach?
Hey, Zach.
And let me answer his question. Did you feel like there was more studio input for this film this time around, or did you get a sense the director and crew were allowed to do their own vision for it? Zach, I have to say, in my opinion, I don't know that any of these films are truly, purely artistic visions of the filmmakers behind them. I think all of them have some measure of studio input or studio interference. I think given all of the turmoil surrounding Warner Brothers and DC and HBO right now, I think it's a safe bet that this movie was probably picked apart by the committee, and the committee oversaw this every step of the way. I think it's a good bet.
I want to be optimistic about this because I know Mr. Johnson, as we'll call him, but Dwayne, Mr. Johnson, he's been kind of like an executive producer in this from the beginning, and he had his own vision on who this character should be, how he should play out this character, and ultimately, I think what Mr. Johnson is hoping for is that this is going to become a new phase one for the DC cinematic universe, or what they call the DC EU extended universe. So, and I feel like this movie is a great launching pad to reboot DC movies. If this is any indication of how they are and where they can go, I think we're off to a great start. So I feel like, you can never escape the clutch of corporate control, but I feel there had to be a lot of Dwayne's input and influence on a lot of the shaping of this film, because I know it's been a passion project of his for years.
Well, I also know a lot of these big stars because The Rock is one of the few movie stars we have left, because the entire concept of the movie star kind of became a thing of the past in the last 15 to 20 years, because it's been mostly about IP, not really about the names on the marquee, but about the properties themselves. That the property is the star, the brand is the star. Will Smith has always had a whole team of screenwriters, from what I understand, that whenever he's interested in a project or he think it has potential, he has them sort of rewrite it and retool it to meet his specifications. Famously, Quentin Tarantino was eyeing him for the lead role in Django Unchained, and Smith didn't like the fact that he didn't get to kill the big bad in the end,
We're spoiling a whole nother movie.
Yeah, a 10-year-old.
I haven't seen that one. You ruined it for me, Scott.
Dude, it's a decade old. If you haven't seen it by now, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, famously, Will Smith wanted to change the script, and that's, you don't change a Tarantino script. So, that was that. But, I wouldn't be surprised if Dwayne Johnson had his own little team, and if he sees a concept or a script, and he'll go to them and say, look, hey guys, I need you to fix this up for me. I need you to make it more suitable to me.
Right. I know Dwayne had a very laser focused vision on this character, how he was going to portray this character, and the impact this character would be for DC cinema, because they've been on shaky ground and there's still a lot of tumultuous things going on there at HBO, Warner, whoever else they merged with this week. So, but I honestly feel like this is phase one of a new DC extended universe, and I think this is a great way to kick it off. I didn't mind having the supporting cast of the Justice Society. I thought these were some interesting characters. I felt their role and their screen time was bigger than it needed to be, but it was neat to sprinkle in a little bit of something in the movie, just to see that the DC world is still alive and strong, and there are other characters out there in the world. And I did love a lot of what happened with with the woman. I can't remember the woman's name, but the woman who's the mother of the kid, you know who I'm talking about if you saw the movie.
Yes.
But she's basically calling these guys out, like, where the hell have you been? Our country has been under oppression for 27 years, and our resources are being stolen, our freedoms are being stolen. You have not basically given a shit about us until something showed up that you feel now you have to save us from. But guess what? We don't need your savior. So I felt that was a really good social commentary on the world police. It's like, why are you here now? Why haven't you? There's so many screwed up things in the world, and now you choose to come in and get involved. That's a statement on the United States and on world policing and all kinds of stuff like that.
Right. And before I reply to what you just said, Zach Gross posted up again about Tarantino having a book coming out discussing the films he grew up with, and I just want to say, yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Zach, very much looking forward to that. But to get back to what you were saying, I think it's also a commentary on the idea of, the DC heroes are, in the movies at least, shown to always be more godlike, whereas the Marvel heroes are more everymen. Stan Lee's concept for Marvel was initially, especially with Spider-Man, what happens if you get all the power in the world, all the power you've ever wanted in life, and then you realize the problems that come with that, and you realize that they don't necessarily make things better for you, that you're still a person that still has to live and pay bills and take care of your Aunt May and everything else. Whereas the DC characters, I think, have always sort of been more godlike, and I'm sure throughout the decades that's probably gone back and forth. I think DC and Marvel have taken influence from each other as far as the actual comics go, in terms of the approaches they've taken over the last few decades. But in the movies, definitely, with Zack Snyder, definitely show these guys to be gods in every sense of the word. Black Adam is no exception. Maybe Shazam himself, in the movie Shazam, there is more of that everyman flavor to the main character because he's just a kid. But Black Adam is clearly, they portray him as basically a vengeful god. And this movie kind of asks a question that I find very tantalizing, but then it kind of backs off that question a bit. Are these gods, or are these entities really worthy of the mantle? And not in the same sense that is Thor or Cap worthy of carrying Mjolnir.
Yeah.
I mean, if Black Adam's only motivation, spoiler, is to avenge the wrongs of the past, avenge what happened to his family, to try to, basically trying to indulging the negative energy he feels from being so empty now that his family is gone, that's not a hero. That's very much not a hero.
Turning to the dark side of the Force.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Right.
So he became a Sith Lord, and that's when they shut his ass down. Yeah.
And that was no, just real quick, that was something I really liked about how they introduced the character. I mean, especially he does a little thing where when he's faced by an army, he'll use this electricity, and it reminded me of Raiders of the Lost Ark when they opened the Ark, and the Ark sent out these beams that put balls of light in everybody's chest, all the Nazis around them. It made him feel more like a biblical plague.
Yes.
So, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, I agree. I think he's an interesting character. I thought it was neat that there were layers to this character that kind of got peeled back throughout the story. You start off thinking that kid we saw at the beginning was Black Adam. We find out later that he was his son, and that the original Black Adam did get his powers from the wizards, the wise old wizards of the Shazam Council, whatever they're called. But Dwayne Johnson did not, right? So he kind of got his power handed down from his son. And then it was revoked by the Wizard Shazam Council. So yeah, a lot of that stuff that kind of got revealed and kind of peeled back was interesting. So every time you think you know who he is or why he's doing what he's doing, there were those revelations that continued to happen. So I felt that unrolling of him was well done and well paced. Another thing I would say that I like about it is the general pacing of this. We're going to talk about Andor probably next week, but Andor is a total slow burn, right? I felt like the pacing of this was really good. Because you got thrown into the story right away. You get to see the initial origin, or what we are led to believe the origin is, and then we move straight to the present, and then we kind of keep going. But I felt like the pacing was the perfect match of a little bit of burn, but not too long. If it, but and then it was a roller coaster, right? So you had your ups and your downs, and I just felt like the siphoning of the intensity in the story and the action and the intrigue and the building. I felt the pacing was very well done in this for my taste.
Oh, the pacing I didn't have a problem with. I think it was under 2 hours. Let me check on that to see, which I consider to be a victory for this genre because
Right.
everything is so bloated these days. Everything has to be over 2 hours. Oh, it's
Yeah,
actually
2.5 hours, 3 hours. Yeah.
well, it's actually 124 minutes, so it's just 4 minutes over 2 hours. But I didn't stay for the end credit scene, so
Oh, I
it felt
did.
like
Well, it was a
just
mid.
two
I guess
hours.
it was a mid credit, but yeah.
Yeah.
Um, no, yeah.
And
Honestly, it surprisingly, it wasn't a terribly long, but
yeah.
it felt good while you were watching it. Like I say, to
Uh,
me, the pacing was great. I didn't feel like anything was dragging. I didn't think like things were going too quickly, and I didn't feel robbed at the end that the movie was too short. So it was that Goldilocks. It was just right. The pacing and the length were perfect.
Shout out to Jason Rayhard, who just
Right,
chimed
Reichert.
in the chat. Reichert.
Yeah,
Sorry, Jason. Forgive me for butchering your name.
yeah. It's one of my friends, one of my two
Okay.
friends. You're my other one. So yeah.
Okay. I hope we're not the only two.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but
Um,
well, one thing I want to say, some of the other issues I had with the film that kind of stopped it from being solid with me. It just, like I said, I felt like so many of these other elements that were brought into the film in the second act or so, I think a lot of them kind of drew attention away and drew the focus away from the main character. And a lot of these things we've kind of seen before, not just in superhero movies, but generally speaking. A lot of these things, there's a lot of elements. And just so that my friend Scott F. Evans, my namesake, one of my good friends, he's been battling me about this all morning. He feels that the film is too derivative of the MCU. He feels like it borrows too much from the MCU films to where even the humor seems like it's a leftover from MCU, or it's a bad attempt at MCU humor. I can see some of what he's saying. That's not my main complaint, though. There are some things that were pulled from Infinity War and Endgame. For instance, Dr. Fate is clearly set up as the Doctor Strange of DC. And
oh yeah,
he even does the multiplying himself thing to fight the big bad.
yeah, yeah.
So those similarities are obvious. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. Just when we talk about that, and Luis Reyes says, "Shout out to me too." What's going on, Luis? Another live viewer. Yeah, we're not used to doing this live, and it can be distracting, which isn't terrible. It adds a new
Well,
dynamic to it. Um,
I mean,
so
it's a little distracting, but I'm just appreciative that these people took the time to
yeah,
watch and comment.
absolutely,
You know,
absolutely. Real quick to talk about inspiration or plagiarization between superheroes and between Marvel and DC, it's been going on since forever.
yeah,
Daredevil was Batman, right?
right.
When DC came up with Swamp Thing, they came up with Man Thing, right? So there's always been these things. So yeah, so Doctor Fate is like Doctor Strange in a sense. So yeah, a lot of these characters have powers, just like Atom Smasher, who was in this, is kind of like Ant-Man, or Power Man, right? So yeah, there's been a lot of this kind of inspiration. Matter of fact, one of the things I remember reading was that um, who played? I'm drawing a blank right now. The James Bond guy who played him. I can't think of his name right now. Help me out here. Who played Doctor
Oh,
Fate in the movie?
Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan. There you go. So Pierce Brosnan, I remember reading something recently that him and his kids both really enjoyed seeing how Doctor Strange was played out in the MCU, and his kids were big fans of Doctor Strange, which kind of motivated him to want to play Doctor Fate in this. So they actually were fans of the MCU's version of Doctor Strange. It was, but yeah, no, I thought Pierce Brosnan was great. He's one of these guys where even though he looks older and he looks kind of like a professor, he can still play a really good character, and his role. And even though, like, again, for us on the big screen, this is the first time we see all these characters together.
Right.
But the relationship between him and Hawkman was very poignant. You felt it, even though it was all kind of thrown in our face. Within less than 2 hours, you felt their history, you felt their connection, you felt their their appreciation and their love for each other. So it's kind of poignant how some of that played out.
Okay, in regards to that, I thought the actors did the best they could with it, and my problems with it aren't with them or their performances. I just would have liked to have seen, before we saw Doctor Strange in Endgame in Infinity War, pretty much doing the exact same thing that Doctor Fate does in this movie. We had a full Doctor Strange movie to kind of get to know and get used to that character and his tics and his eccentricities and just his powers and how he sees the world and how he deals with enemies, blah blah blah. This time we really didn't. I didn't feel like there was enough connective tissue or setup to really feel the loss. Again, spoilers, major spoilers for all Lewis, Jason, Zach.
It's
major
on the
spoilers.
screen. The word spoilers is on the screen. Yes.
Yeah. I understood what the movie wanted me to feel.
Yes.
And I thought the performances were good, but it was just like, I haven't spent enough time with this character for that really to hit me in the way that it should. And maybe that's just me.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that, but I don't think DC has the luxury of building solo movies and backstories on single characters right now. They're so far behind Marvel, and they're still trying to recoup from so much misdirection of where they're going and how they should be going, that they really, as much as I don't disagree that would be great, they don't have the time or the money to do that. And I don't know that he would have been like Doctor Strange was a great movie. I don't know that a Doctor Fate movie could have been done as well as a Doctor Strange movie. So
I can't speak to that either way because I don't know much about Doctor Fate.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, the plot to this movie should have simply been, like they said in the beginning, we have to get Teth Amon. Is that his name? Teth Amon? Black Adam's name before he becomes Black Adam.
Right. There was another name for it, like Death Adam or Teth Adam or something like that. Yeah.
Teth Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah. It should have been like they said. We have to get him to depower himself by saying his name, and then we have to shut him up, put him in suspended animation. That should have been, the movie should have ended with them putting him in suspended animation, and then right before the credits roll, you see his eyes open inside the suspended animation chamber just as credits roll, in order to let you know I'm coming back.
I'm coming back.
Yeah. That's what this should have been. But again, I think that perhaps Warner's and DC, with everything they've gone through, that they can't really afford another critical and commercial setback. They tried to set it up more along the lines of a typical superhero film and kind of soften Black Adam's edges in some ways. That's just my take.
Yeah, I don't think he was completely soft. I think I love the interaction between him and the kid, because the kid is hip. The kid lives in 2022, where superheroes all around us. He knows all about Batman and the Flash and the Justice League. So he's like, man, you got to have a great catchphrase. You got to change your name. You need a cool name, right? And it's almost like the Terminator 2, where John Connor is trying to teach the kid to say like hasta la vista and all that. So it's kind of teaching him to think like we think now, and you gotta have a great catchphrase, and he kills the guy, and then he says the catchphrase, like no, he's like, oh, so you want me to do catchphrase first, and then so there some of those little moments I thought were great. So yeah, I think how they revealed him, how he kind of came out when he got awoken, and how he presented himself to be at least a hero to the woman and her kid and their little search party there. You get the sense he's a decent guy. You can see him kind of taking on all the bad guys with guns, all the kind of mercenaries. So you're like, okay, this guy's probably a good guy. And then 10 minutes later, you have all these other superheroes we got to take him down, right? Because he exists and he's a potential threat. And they kind of played with that in Superman, Batman v Superman. God bless you. And they played with that a little bit in the Snyder cut, of everything, where that was kind of the fear of Superman himself. Yeah, he's good. He's on our side, but he's got all these powers. He does have these godlike powers. What happens if Superman loses it and decides to turn his wrath on the world? And Snyder Cut showed us a dark future of basically evil Superman, terrorizing the planet. That's a fear, and so that's the fear they have now from him because he has the potential to be a world destroyer. We need to put him in a cage. That's just the first thought and the first reaction. And again, and I said earlier, that's kind of the common theme that happens where you get these people together, they're not friends, and somehow they have to become friends. I feel that was the only disappointing part, was that kind of trope was done so many times. It would have been nice to see it done differently, but then the movie might not have been 2 hours.
Right. Right. Well, like I said, they have a lot of other considerations. We as fans,
Yeah.
we have the luxury to kind of just talk about what we want to see. But these movies have to play to a much bigger audience than just us. So there's other considerations that the benefactors and the bean counters and the suits have, and also the artists themselves. So, we need to realize that as fans, we need to realize that when discussing these things, it's not just about us and what we want.
Yeah. Well, I'll say that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson did a hell of a job. He looked like a godlike superhero. He had that superhero physique, kind of like what we saw in the most recent Thor: Love and Thunder, how beefed up Thor was. He was just as beefy, if not more beefier, right? So we got a whole lot of beef in that tight black suit there. Definitely looking like a living god, like superhero, superpowers. And I feel he carried himself well. And The Rock has shown in all of his movies he can balance drama and humor, and he can do both well. And I think there was a great mix of that. I love that he had zero qualms on killing the bad guys. Just kill them. They're bad. Kill them.
Well, yeah, he was like Vader in The Empire Strikes Back. He just sort of kept, killing people left and right with no regard for anything. The Rock is usually, from my experience, he's usually one of the better parts of the movies he's in. My feelings about The Rock are, we didn't need another podcast for that. But just to sum it up, I always think that The Rock maybe became a star about 10 or 20 years too late. I feel like he really is Schwarzenegger 2.0.
Yeah.
He's pretty much the heir apparent to Schwarzenegger and a better actor than Arnold ever was.
Right.
A better actor. But whereas with Arnold was able to find directors like James Cameron, Paul Verhoeven, movies like The Terminator, Total Recall, Predator, that were unique vehicles in and of themselves and stood out in the marketplace even from other action movies and other sci-fi movies. They were good despite his presence in them, not just because he was in them. Whereas with The Rock, I feel like it's gone the opposite. He has these sort of nondescript films that kind of are all feel the same, and he's the best thing about them. And I kind of wish he could find his Paul Verhoeven or his James Cameron and do that special standout movie that becomes a classic even beyond just for people who like The Rock.
Okay. What I can say is I've never hated any of the DC movies. I felt there have been some hits and some misses. I don't feel for the most part a lot of the DC movies were on par with the first couple phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they were good content. Some standout ones are definitely Wonder Woman, the origin story, Aquaman's origin story, Batman v Superman-ish. I came to like it better watching it a second time under the Snyder Cut. Same thing with the Justice League. So I feel like they were decent, but they were inconsistent. I feel like right now with Black Adam, we're off to a great new start on a strong, powerful movie that is an action roller coaster ride. Again, it's going to be hard to please everybody. But I really feel like the things that, for me, as just a fan of action movies and spectacles and blockbusters and superheroes and special effects and explosions, all that kind of stuff, this movie delivered. I feel like Black Adam is an interesting character. I feel like we are set up to see where he can go next. Another kind of pitfall of some of these movies, and we look at something like the sequel to Venom and Carnage, right? So when they did Carnage, you had two very powerful creatures that you could have played with much more. But when you've got a creature so powerful that you need something equally as powerful to be a threat to them, and then at the end of that, you just destroy the threat, you've kind of taken away the gas of, well, what can I face next? Now that's up to the people to when they can write the next sequel to do that. But you almost feel like, and this is what's happened in the comic books, the bad guys don't always just die. They kind of
Right.
limp away and live to strike another day. So when you have his first threat was so big and he destroys that threat. Okay, well, what now his next threat? Well, we can get into the mid-credit teaser, which I think is a great, somebody I was looking to see in on screen again. Somebody we're both a fan of. Did you see it? You ready to talk about that?
You're talking about the post-credit scene?
Yes.
I did not see it because I was hoping you weren't going to ask me about this. I didn't see it. I read about it online, but
Okay.
I kind of had to rush out of the theater as soon as it was over. I read about it online. I know who makes an appearance in it. I'm just curious as to who's playing him.
Well, the Man of Steel.
Oh,
Man of Steel himself makes a cameo in the mid-credit sequence.
Okay.
So the woman, I can't think of her name, but she's kind of the one who's been kind of running the Suicide Squad. And so she's the one that calls all the shots from the control room for both the Suicide Squad movies. Black Lady, can't think of the actor's name or the character's name in the show. But she kind of shows up a couple times in the movie. And at the very end, you have this mid-credit scene and Black Adam's like sitting here in this dark, destroyed chamber, and then this little kind of probe, what do you call those things? The drone kind of flies in, pulls up a hologram projection, and it's her. And she's like, all right, we put you in a box once. You got out. So here's what's going to go on right now. You are in another prison. You need to... Viola Davis. Thank you, Zach.
Yes.
So Viola says, you need to stay here. This is your prison. You cannot leave this country. And if you do, we're going to come down on you. And he says, well, there's nobody on this planet who can defeat me. She's like, well, I can call in a favor and I can bring in somebody from another planet, right? And the next thing you know, you see Henry Cavill come down in the super suit. Oh, actually comes out through a cloud of smoke. So it's a dramatic reveal. And he's like, hey, I'm hearing some things about you. You've got some interesting powers. You and me, we need to talk, right? And that was kind of it. It wasn't like a battle. He did what I wished the Justice Society would have done, is not just come in with guns blazing, but say, hey, dude, you look like you could be a threat. Why don't we talk and see if you are?
See, I like that setup. I like that setup because, again, it plays into, this guy is dangerous. This is not somebody that we should be cheering for by the end of the film because he vanquished evil. This is a guy that we should always sort of be on our toes with. And I like the idea of, Superman. Just like that reminds me of Dark Knight Returns when President called in a favor. I think there was some interference there.
Yeah, you paused for a second, but we're still going. You're back. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It reminded me of Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, where President Reagan pretty much calls in a favor and has Superman go and finally stop Batman once and for all because he's become a lunatic. He's become a fascist who's taken control of Gotham.
Okay.
So I like that idea.
Now, Zach says, I'm in the minority here, but I enjoyed the Snyderverse much more than I did the Nolan Batman trilogy. I just do not enjoy that trilogy at all, other than Heath Ledger as the Joker.
Please, Steve, let me respond. Please.
Go ahead, Scott. This is your friend. I don't want to make an enemy of a stranger.
Hey, Zach, man. Zach, I love you. I'm always happy when I see you respond to one of my posts, and I'm always happy to see when you take the time to comment. And please continue to do so. But I got to come down hard on the opposite side of this one.
Snap.
Sorry, man. I got to come down hard on the opposite side. The Nolan trilogy, the Snyder films are like a great painting that hangs in a museum, but all I can do is sit there and look at it. I can't really, it feels like a museum piece because he's mainly good with the visuals. But I found the first two films in the Nolan trilogy to be very engaging and very entertaining. But I mean, as they say, to each his own. I'm sure you probably have some reasons there may be some personal reasons even why you prefer the Snyderverse. You know, and you're not alone. There are many other people who feel that way. So
Well, it's kind of like how we talk about comic books reboot themselves over time, and film has been rebooting itself over time. There's just been different generations, you know. So the fact that the Christopher Nolan trilogy is going on, 15 years ago when that came out, and then then we had the Snyder, we had Batfleck, and now we've got Twilight Guy as Batman. And we were teased and then denied seeing the original 1989 Batman coming back in the Flashpoint. So I don't know what's going on with all the Batman. I enjoyed each one. I think each one, for the period of time that it was released, served society well. It gave us things to watch and enjoy and be entertained with. I won't say I like the Snyder better than the Nolan. I think they each stand out as their own different forms of entertainment. But I will say I like the Snyder cuts versus the original theatrical cuts. I think, the longer version of Justice League really played well. I enjoyed it more, and the longer version, the extended cut of Batman v Superman played out better. They kind of recomposited the film, made the colors different, kind of redid some of the visual effects. They made some of the villains look better. So there's a lot of things, kind of like a Star Wars special edition, in a way, which not everybody is a fan of. Hand did shoot first, but I do like the Snyder cut for what it is. And here's his response. You see Zach's response right there. So
yeah, I see it. I see it.
Yeah. So for those who aren't watching us live, Zach's response was, "We all have opinions and different tastes, so there's never any hard feelings. It's just nice to see and discuss other opinions. It's what I miss about my days working at Blockbuster before our demise."
Well, I think even more interesting than anyone's opinion is I would like to hear Zach's sort of explain his opinion. Not that he has to explain anything to me or anybody. But I just like to hear what his reasons are for preferring the Snyderverse.
Zach, why don't you join us on our next episode as a guest and talk about stuff? Scott, send him some information. And
right. Hey, Zach, hit me up. Zach, hit me up on Facebook Messenger if you're still listening.
Yeah, and we'll send you the link to join us on our web studio that we're in here right now doing this with. But because we have other things to talk about, we got to talk about Andor and other things that we'll save for the next episode. What I will say about Black Adam, totally enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend anybody, if you're on the fence, just see it. If you're worried about being entertained, my opinion, I was entertained. Of course, for me, ignorance is bliss. I don't know anything about him. And I just went to see a movie, and the movie was a great ride. And I wasn't disappointed as a whole. I can nitpick a few little pieces of it, which I have discussed, but I would definitely give the movie a big thumbs up. Big fat thumbs up in the air. I liked the flick. And I'm looking forward to the future of the DC Cinematic Universe, or DC Extended Universe.
I give it a neutral thumb.
A side thumb.
A horizontal thumb.
A horizontal thumb. The thumb's not up. It's not down. It's just in the middle, huh?
Yeah, I was entertained. I was entertained to an extent, but it didn't really clear the landing for me. I am interested, if they're going to do a sequel, I'm interested as to how that may turn out, if they're going to have the same creative team, because I'd like to see this concept tried again. And that's where I stand with it. I mean, the DC films, they're kind of in a weird spot right now, and I don't know how that's going to turn out in the long run.
Right, and there's a few that are already filmed that have been delayed for a variety of reasons. So, like Aquaman 2, not exactly sure when that's going to drop in the theaters, and the Flash movie, or Flashpoint, or whatever they're going to call it, that has been, because of all the legal troubles with Ezra Miller and things like that. When these things, obviously, they're coming out after Black Adam. To me, I feel like Black Adam has set the stage moving forward on where the DC Cinematic Universe should go. And I call it that because it's in the cinema, but they call it the DC EU Extended Universe, so whatever. Right? So where DC movies should go, I feel like Black Adam has kind of paved a path for us to move forward, for me, with great anticipation. I don't think Aquaman 2 is going to suck in any way, but the style and the theme and how it was done when it was done, coming out after Black Adam. It's kind of like, when you're trying to do a comedy showcase and somebody just kind of came in and killed it, and you put the strongest comic up first, somebody has to follow that. They might not do as well as they came out before. So I don't know what the expectations, fan expectations, are going to be trying to compare these movies. I can't see. I enjoyed the first Aquaman, the Aquaman origin story. I can't see this one being a bad movie. I'm just wondering how it's going to feel and what flavor it's going to be now being released so much later than it should have been. Same thing with the Flash.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that Flash movie, especially with everything that's going on with Ezra Miller, because they're trying desperately to protect that thing from the fallout of his behavior. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think as far as Black Adam is concerned, I think we kind of can put a bow on that one.
Yeah, but we do have a little bit of an audience that we're actually able to engage with. And so, what I would ask for those of you who are out there right now, I don't know how many of you have listened to the podcast, but because I've intentionally tried to not make this a live show because I already do so many live things. I really wanted Scott and I, to be able to focus on things and talk about them without losing our train of thought, because it's hard for me to remember and think in the first place. So what I would ask for those of you watching us now is, if you can, check out some of our podcast episodes and listen to them. The couple that I'm really pleased with right now is I just dropped, we just did a review on season 1 of She-Hulk. I just dropped that today, so that's out there. The two parters we did talking about video games, that's a huge passion project for me. Video games have been my life, for 80% of my life. So I would love to get some people to listen to those episodes. I intentionally designed a show you could listen to, so you could listen to it while you're in your car and you're on the road, and you can squeeze it in and not have it take away from your life, but hopefully be some content that fills your ears and fills your mind, and feedback. I'm finding it's hard for us to get feedback on the podcast because it's not an interactive medium. Right. So, I would like to get some feedback on some of those episodes. For some of you who maybe are watching it for the first time and haven't listened to any of our podcasts, please go to culturegoespop.com. Look for us on your podcast app, whatever that might be, and listen to some of the episodes. Listen to the newer ones first, because we're actually getting better.
Right.
So listen to them in newest to oldest order, or maybe listen to the latest 2 or 3. It's interesting conversations. I look forward to having many more. So we're going to put a fork in this one, Scott Wilson?
Yeah, I think it's done. It's done.
Yeah, so listen to She-Hulk. Listen to episode 20. I just dropped the link to that in our Facebook page today. So Scott and I just shared our thoughts and opinions on season 1 of She-Hulk. Give that a listen. And thank you for everybody who's been here live right now. We started off with Andre Holzendorf, and then Zach Grills joined us. And then Jason Reichard and Luis Reyes, and Zach and Jason and Lewis. So yeah, thanks guys for popping in. Thanks for chatting with us and enjoying the journey. This will still be a podcast you can listen to in a couple days too. So we'll go ahead and download it, turn it into an audio file, stick it up there in the podcast space, and you can jam out to it later on in your car. Say goodbye, Scott Wilson.
Goodbye, everybody, and thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
All right, goodbye, everybody. Take care.